The Soul Man, Jan Matzeliger's lasting invention, written by Shana Keller and illustrated by Stephen Costanza. Is this a joke? The inspector asked. What kind of contraption is this? Jan took a deep breath. He held the diagrams and instructions in his hands, instructions so complex that the United States Patent Office had sent an inspector to investigate. They didn't think the machine Jan invented could be real. A patent would protect Jan's rights as the sole inventor of his machine. If the patent was approved, Jan would be able to license his invention and make money off of it. Sir, I present to you my lasting machine, Jan said. His voice was strong, but his hands shook a little as the inspector slowly stepped around the giant machine, eyeing it this way and that. This wasn't the first model Jan had built. It wasn't even his first machine. Jan had grown up in Suriname in South America, around machines that whirred, purred, clunked, and clanked. As a young boy, he worked in his father's mechanic shops, building, fixing, and tinkering. Jan had to stop himself from tinkering now while the inspector poked at his machine. This was all your idea? The inspector asked. Jan nodded and told the inspector about his first job in America. When he was 19, Jan had left South America and his father's workshops on a merchant ship. He ventured across the ocean from one continent to another. 2 years later, Jan landed in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the workshop of the world. The city clamored and clanged with hundreds of factories and jobs. If only he spoke English. Jan spoke Dutch, which made it hard to communicate. He didn't have the right skin color either. Although the American Civil War had ended nearly a decade earlier, no one wanted to hire a black immigrant who couldn't speak English. But Jan didn't give up. He tried and tried until finally he found a job in one of Philadelphia's factories. A shoe factory. Jan was relieved. The machines he saw and learned how to use spoke in a language he was familiar with. It was there that Jan first used the Mackay, named after its inventor, Gordon Mackay, to produce shoes. The Mackay stitched two pieces of leather together to make the bottom part of the shoe, called the sole. Then a skilled worker, a hand laster, wrapped a smooth piece of leather around a wooden foot model called a last. To hold the upper shoe's material in place, the hand laster punched holes into the leather using nails. Then he sewed that piece to the sole by hand. The job required 12 to 16 inches per stitch. A good hand laster could only make 20 to 30 pairs of shoes per week. This slowed down the manufacturing process and made shoes a luxury. Jan wondered why there weren't any machines to connect the upper piece of the shoe to the sole. That's impossible, one hand laster laughed. You have to sew the top part first, then shape it over the last. Line the material up perfectly, which is hard to do. Hold it steady, punch the holes, and then sew them together. Jan remembered studying each step for so long, the hand laster scoffed at him. If the shoe manufacturers can't mechanize this process, what makes you think you can, he asked. No one can create such a thing. Perhaps, but Jan had grown up using tools and fixing machines. Ideas looped in his mind like thread through a needle. Jan didn't have a lot of money, but he saved what he could, and a couple of years later he moved to Lynn, Massachusetts, the shoe capital of the world. Once again, it took him a while to find a job, but he was eventually hired at the Harney Brothers Shoe Factory. There, Jan used new machines that produced different parts of the shoe. One machine cut out the upper parts of the shoe, and another one created the holes for the buttons. But just like in Philadelphia, Jan saw the same problem. He asked the same questions and got the same answers. No one thought he could invent a machine that would mold the upper part of the shoe to a last, then sew it to the sole. He was discouraged when people didn't support him or believe in his idea. But Jan stayed focused, and he believed in himself. Now, after 3 long years of planning, drawing, and testing, Jan's eyes shone and his heart raced. It was time to share his invention. The machine stood taller than Jan and took up most of the space in the small room he rented. "How does it work?" the inspector asked. Jan remembered the cold months and long nights it had taken to make his first model, a prototype. The prototype was made from cheap materials like cigar boxes, wire, and scrap metal. The materials weren't strong, but they were all he could afford. To make the prototype, Jan drew diagrams of what he thought each step in the shoemaking process would require. He used other machines in the shoemaking process as a reference point. He also went to night school to improve his English and art skills. When his drawings were finished, he labeled every part. Then he sketched out the individual pieces that would make up the machine. Following these detailed drawings, Jan built the parts, then used those parts to assemble his model. "Allow me to demonstrate," Jan said. Jan put the materials in place. He set the dials and pulled the levers. The machine did exactly what the hand lester said it couldn't do. It stretched and molded the upper leather to the foot last. It lined the material up perfectly with the sole. It held the shaped leather piece down, punched the holes, and lastly sewed the pieces together. "My goodness!" The inspector circled the giant contraption in the small room. He watched in awe as Jan's lasting machine spit out one completed shoe after another. Jan had tinkered and tinkered until his lasting machine could make up to 700 shoes in one day. His patent was approved.